What's up, everybody? Mark on the mic, joined by my very good friend, Mr. Dan Staton, Elk Shape, Dan the Elk Man himself. I don't know, Dan, one of my very good friends.
Definitely.
Maybe that's the best title we can give you right now. Always great visiting. We're down here at the Western Hunting Conservation Expo. It's time to get elky.
Elky.
Dan, you've been hunting elk for a lot of years. It is one of your main areas of focus. You had a great season last year. In fact, you've had multiple great seasons. Personally, selfishly, I'll probably draw an elk tag this year, so I'll be hopefully getting an elky myself this fall.
Good deal.
And looking for some tips here. I want some of your best. Throw your best stuff at me
right now, like the juiciest.
Yeah. I want to hear about stuff that's working. I want to hear about some outside the box tips, stuff that maybe you're doing that other people aren't doing that's leading to success. Hit me. What's going to get me that bull on the ground this fall?
Definitely. Okay. Well, we talked about a little bit in the last pod, but like your mindset. Okay. Let's go ahead and start now in the off season making some deposits into your mental toughness bank account because elk hunting sucks. It is hard. They don't want to die. And you're not really going to get one if you're not into them all the time. So I think the biggest mistake most people make is they're just married to one spot. Maybe it's an old haunt. Maybe it's the most convenient, sweetest trailhead near the best looking campground, and you've got a whole fleet of people next to you. Well, that's like bottleneck stuff. That's just going to be, those elk are going to be pieced out pretty quick. You know what I mean? I think a lot of guys go too deep. I think a lot of guys got a lot of vigor, and it might be more crowded 4 or 5 miles past the trailhead. You get to this beautiful meadow, and there's just a handful of tents already there. So like people are really intelligent these days. They have a lot of resources, these podcasts. They have incredible mapping software. They know how to e-scout.
Better equipment to get back to that point and live back there.
Yeah, lighter gear, better gear. So you're going to have to think outside the box. Well, what does that even mean? So it means how are the elk going to react to this pressure that is certain if you're hunting public land, depending on where you're going in the terrain type? I just know that elk have this way about them of being very flexible, very nomadic. They're not an animal that, even if they don't have any pressure, I can't guarantee they're going to come back to the same grocery store night over night. I don't know what it is. Some do, and I like those ones that do. But the rest of them seem to be pretty nomadic, and they can change zip codes. They have 4 legs. They're way, way more equipped to travel through the mountains than us. They're also hunted year-round. There's not just our hunting season. There's a rifle season. There's a muzzleloader season. There's a mountain lion or two that enjoy them. Wolves, bears, you name it. So they're just much like home field advantage. Is that safe to say?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like the guests. We're like the visitors. So looking at how elk move and how they react to hunting pressure is something I think you got to really dive into. If you have an area narrowed down, is to think about, okay, maybe it doesn't have to be the furthest from the trailhead, but maybe it's just got the nastiest topography or a river that no one wants to wade across. It's too deep. No one's got a raft. There's 2 mile stretch where you can't cross. Maybe find a way to cross in that 2 mile stretch. You might have to negotiate a sea of downfalls, but you're going to find this little benched out area where they have just found as a place to get away from, Doug Flutie, all the guys hunting. So I do think you need to have backup plans when you're looking at where to go. How are they going to move about the country? Where are they going to find that safety and security? You hear that a lot. You do. What does that even mean? Safety and security. A thermal and a prevailing wind advantage. Use your whitetail hunting skills because the elk are going to rely on that as well. So how is that airflow going to move through this area? Okay, they have a wind advantage. They like this. There's a bench, comfortable place to lay down. There is nearby water. Okay, cool. Groceries aren't that far away. It's cool. Elk have incredibly thick hides that grow at an incredible rate. I literally start elk hunting in end of August, and I almost look at these bulls coming by, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thin summer coat, 2 weeks later, it's like they got this brown long mane, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what you see in the magazines. Like that grew in 2 weeks. You know what I mean? That's a lot of insulation. They need to be cooled off, wallowed, watering, shade, north. So you got to like think through, like, be an elk that doesn't want to be bothered, and where can you go to? So I think all those things go into it. Now, to find those elk, sometimes outside the box type stuff I do is I don't set up a really cool camp that's like got all the bells and whistles and it's very comfortable. I almost on purpose find places to camp where I'm just going to be there for a day. My truck's going to just sit there for a day. I'm going to sleep in my rooftop tent. I got to go fast camper, just in and out, and I'm going to change spots. I typically change spots when I can't legally hunt. When are you not allowed to hunt? Well, after 30 minutes sunrise, before and after, and then you're out of legal shooting light. That's a good time to change camps, or a good time to try to locate elk from roads, from trails, from long ridges. And what I mean locate is I mean literally let out some cow calls, some loud ones with an external, or some soft ones with a diaphragm, a really ringing location bugle from your bugle tube. I think elk are more likely to answer you at night.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking like 1 a.m. I'm like, it just got dark. Instead of hiking back to the truck, maybe hike further away from your truck. I don't care if you sleep in the next day. If you locate some elk, you got elk to hunt. So my secret formula, that's not that secret, is I typically am into elk every single day. Now, there's a lot of work that goes into being able to do that, and some sleep that is not accumulated. But I have found it more enjoyable to be into elk every single day. So I spend a lot more time finding elk after dark, even if it tacks on an extra hour to my hike back to the truck, or if it means throwing out a spike camp. And so be into elk to kill elk. Time is your number one killer, and then being into elk every day, and then thinking about how elk will move or react to hunting pressure. That's it.
I like that, man. I mean, like you said, like being mobile, not only, on foot, but being able not, pot committed to one spot, not setting up that deluxe camp, being able to, stick and move. Like you said, at the end of the day, you just had a day of elk hunting. Oftentimes that's hard. You're tired.
Guaranteed.
You're ready to be done.
Yep.
But I do like that method of like, hey, I'm going to put in some extra at the end of the day. Maybe you do lose some sleep, and maybe you are in a deficit if you do get up the next morning.
You will.
Or maybe you don't get that crazy early start. You do get some sleep. You're going in fully charged, but you have a
general area.
Yeah.
Kind of pegged. A lot of times I will get up because those elk may bed in a different spot, but at least I know right where I'm going in the morning, and I'll follow them from afar to their bedroom, wait for the wind to change, and go take a nap in the elk's bubble. A couple 100 yards away, above them, and maybe I'll set the bugle alarm, meaning I'm definitely going to take a nap here, but I'm sure going to wake up to a bull bugling probably by 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. And then I'll kind of like make my next move from there.
Well, and from a mental mindset too, I'm picturing kind of what you have going on. It's a lot easier to get up, when you're tired and when you have that lead.
It's a lead.
If you don't have that, if you're like, well, what's the plan? Where do you want to go? I don't know. I might go here. A lot easier to be like, let's sleep in a couple extra hours. We don't really have a lead. But when you have, they're like, oh gosh, I know there's an elk over there. We got to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a lot of friends that tell me, man, I went to Colorado. I was there for 10 days. We got into elk 2 of the 10 days, and they were awesome. Like, we had some really cool encounters. And I'm like, man, you got to be a really good elk hunter and have a lot of luck with only 2 encounters in 10 days to get it done. I'm not that good. I need an encounter almost every day for 10 days, and I still may not get one.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's tricky. But I would hate to see you be stuck in one area and not be brave enough, is what I'm going to call it. Like, have the courage to leave an area that you know well in search of others to have more encounters.
Where are you finding elk, like, at different points of the day? Like, if it's in the morning, are you focusing on, whatever, this side of the slope versus that side of the slope? In the middle of the day, are you focusing on maybe this part of the slope or this side of the slope? Like, how do you manage that so people can rule in or rule out where they should even be looking to have these encounters?
It's so dependent on the terrain, the state. I've been fortunate enough to hunt pretty much every state out west. And even state to state, there's different. Like, take Montana, for example. You were there last year in a blizzard. Montana's got so much diverse terrain. Do you want to hunt the jungles of the northwest Montana? It's steep. It's deep. It's got a lot of cover. It's not a lot of glass. It's probably an elk vocalization game. There's a lot of predators. You want to hunt central Montana, where that's a very vague term, but there's several mountain ranges in there. Some elk live on the mountains, and some elk come off the mountains down into ag and go back up to the mountains. And you got breaks, you got eastern plains, you got southwest Montana. It depends. It really depends on where you're at in the terrain. I personally try to use glass.
I like that.
As much as possible. I'm okay with sitting at a master vantage. When you guys came out with the Razor, the mini Razor, like 56 millimeter spotter, that thing has changed my life, because that with like a carbon tripod weighs less than my old Vortex 65 angled.
Mm-hmm.
I would always debate, am I going to bring a spotting scope? I never not bring a spotting scope now. It makes sense. Plus, I like the digiscope. I like to get footage. So I am always looking for master vantages, places where I can see as far as possible. Throw some UHDs in there. And that's a good combination to really just sit down, be patient, and learn and study. And I'm not only looking for elk, man. Like last year in Idaho, I think one of my master vantages, I glassed up 5 different sets of hunters. And usually there's guys hunting with a partner. And I watched how they came in and how they came out. I watched how the elk reacted, and I made decisions based on what I observed. So be an observer. Find places where you can glass. And that's not always the case, depending on the state, the terrain. Some states, some country, you're going to have to hear bugles or find the sign. So either you're covering tons of ground and you're good at reading elk sign and understanding when it's fresh and what it's telling you, how many animals are in this herd, where are they traveling, what's the gait. Oh, the gate's like they're moving. This is a transition zone. The gate's slow. Oh, they're feeding here. There's, there's night beds. This is day beds. This is north facing. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. But I think as your woodmanship develops and you start understanding the animal, no matter what state I hunt in, elk are elk. They have kind of these similar things that they do, regardless of the terrain in the country, things that they want. The biggest thing I've seen in elk is that they are capable of covering vast ranges, so you should be too.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. I like that. Are you and maybe the answer is both, or that depends, like so many things, but predominantly, are you trying to call in elk, or are you trying to get in their bubble and kill them?
I am not trying to call elk anymore. I've done a lot of that and had success. I like shooting elk that don't know I'm not there. And you will have better shot opportunities by not calling elk in. And this is, I should say, this is through the lens of a guy who solo elk hunts.
Okay.
You and I hunting together, and we're in thicker country. I want to call for you. I think I can bring an elk to me, which will set you up for a broadside shot.
Okay.
Solo doesn't always work out that way. It's tricky. There's hang-up spots. There's frontals, quartering twos. I like an elk feeding. I like an elk chill. They don't jump the string. They don't know it's there. So I do like to ambush elk or sneak in on elk way more than calling elk. And I also think the less you call, the chances of shooting a bigger bull go up, in my experience. So satellites are definitely easier to call in than a wise old 5.5 to 8.5-year-old herd bull who's heard that song and dance, is pretty hip to it. And also, I'm not a world-class elk caller. I'm good enough, but, I mean, elk are pretty hip to calling these days, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, How about you?
Elk are my arch nemesis, Dan.
Oh.
So they generally have at least some sort of force field on them, around them that can deflect arrows. Now, I will say this. A lot of my elk hunting is Western Washington, where I just don't there's a lot of people. There's like
no,
not like
beautiful country. Gosh,
maybe I'm just like a terrible elk hunter, which that is quite possibly the case. But man, it's thick over there, and
that is some beautiful country.
I've tried to thread the needle on a handful of bulls on close and just like it's like these alders like reach out and grab my arrow, and one time just the tiniest like piece of a stump caught my arrow on its way to a really, really, really big bull. Yeah, it was literally like this like 2-inch extra piece that stuck up from the stump that like it just got me. So, but yeah, I'm looking to get out west again this fall, and hopefully, change the tune a little bit. Hopefully, be in a little bit better shape, right? Because I think that always comes into play as far as how far you can go.
Yeah.
Are you going to go over that next ridge? What happens when I do kill a bull over there?
Figure that out later. Call a packer.
Right.
Call some friends.
What equipment wise? Anything you've done recently that you're like, yeah, I like that change?
Oh.
Like, like something maybe you were doing before, but you're like, yeah, I'm either I think this is the better route to go, whether it's arrows, bows, whatever.
No, man, I think you just spend the off season trying to figure out what gives you the most confidence. When you figure that out, you'll know. If you've never found anything that gives you confidence, I would be concerned. So treat the laboratory at home, the ABT, I call it, always be tinkering, isn't to change stuff, just to change stuff, man. It is to try to find out what gives you the good vibes, the warm fuzzies, because I want you to show up with confidence. Confidence kills. And then believe in your system and go execute, That's really what ABT is all about, is just getting down to what honestly gives you the most confidence when you head out the door.
Mm-hmm. 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 What are some things that have given you confidence over time?
Repetition. I don't shoot like 20, 30, 40, 50 yards at my home range anymore.
Okay.
I've never shot an elk really at a nice even number. If you're calling an elk in, you'll range a couple spots if you're the shooter, and it's going to be 25-ish. That's 34-ish, 40-ish. So you should be shooting, like, take your 40-yard pin if you have a 3-pin or a 5-pin, and I want you to shoot at 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 40, 45. I want you to pin gap. I want you to know I'm going to hold my pin high. I'm going to hold my pin low. I want you to know your limitations. We all have them. The last thing you do is show up to the elk woods not having experience at a shot angle, a shot position, meaning I want you to know how effective are you on one knee with a backpack on, with a high heart rate, shooting up a 30-degree slope. For some of you, that's 30 yards, and there's no shame in that. Know that. How far can you shoot downhill effectively, accurately, and how's your guessing yardage game, and what's your pin gap, and what's your arrow trajectory. Those type of things get overlooked. A lot of us go to our backyard and shoot like those known yardages, and we're just trying to get groups and be confident, and I just don't think that matters as much as, no, man, take 3 arrows and guess the range and do it quick, because that's how elk hunting is. It happens fast, and you're falling back to your highest level of preparation. You are not rising to a level that you did not prepare for. That is the gospel. That is 25 years of elk hunting telling you, a guy who's made all the mistakes, and I will continue to make more. Practice some cool stuff. Don't get stuck into the same old. So,
are you, when you're doing that practice, and this is something that I've seen, like you said, there's nothing, it's never perfect. It's never that perfect backyard shot that I know I practiced predominantly, right? Are you doing like kind of like awkward position stuff too,
yes,
just to see how that I guess how it turns out, right? Like what happens when I'm shooting off my knees? What happens when I'm perhaps leaning or something like that? What types of stuff are you implementing into your practice regimen to know like how to know your limits and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my limits are definitely 50 and under for anything like sitting on your butt, one knee, kneeling with my weight back on my boots, 50 yards or closer, kneeling with my weight up on my knees with a backpack. I can pull my bow back seated. I can pull my bow back on my back. I only found this out because I tested it to make sure I wasn't overbowed. I have pretty good groups when I run down my little hill and run back, grab an arrow and shoot with a backpack on. The pin floats all over the place, but I've come to find out if I just continue to stare and go through my shot process and get a clean break, I'm in a 10 zone or I'm in an 8. I'm not like missing the target, and that it's okay for my pin to float a lot more with a high heart rate. I didn't know that a couple years ago. I just hoped and prayed, and hope's not going to cut it. I have a steep shop. I climb up that and shoot off of that. I get a ladder and get up on top and shoot downhill. I shoot steep uphills. I know that uphills are not a strength of mine. Like shooting steep uphill shots, whatever reason, it shortens my draw length. I'm just working through that. That's a weakness. I'm working on it. So I typically 50 and under for steep uphill shots for me. I know my trajectory. So like shooting with branches and knowing if my arrow will clear things, you can't know that unless you practice that and find out what is the pathway of that arrow when it's at 50, 60 versus 40 versus 20. What about if it's under 15 yards? Am I using my top pin? If it's at 8 yards, should I be using my 50-yard pin? Like, you need to know that. So, like, not to blow, like, add a bunch of stress to the listeners, but, like, darn it, practice some of this stuff. Please. You'll thank me later. And hopefully none of this comes into play and the bull walks out at 20 yards and you use your top pin and it's a done deal. But there's a lot of opportunities that you might miss if you didn't have experience finding out what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. So,
no, and I think a lot of what you've talked about, at least, towards the end of this podcast, is it's that final bit. It's that execution. You've worked so hard to get to this spot where this opportunity is in front of you, and whatever shape that opportunity is taking, if you practice enough and enough of these weird scenarios, which oftentimes, like I said, nothing is perfect in the woods, man. I don't care if you're deer hunting, elk hunting, angles are different, terrain is different, but if you've seen it before, then and you're going to have that confidence, and then you're going to execute that shot, and you are going to be going, man, all that stuff paid off, and I'm glad I did that, because if I hadn't, you'd be telling the story about the one that got away.
Which I've done.
Yes, me too. All right, man. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you joining me, and we'll get you out of here so you can go talk about elk more.
Yes, sounds good to me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.